Late one stormy night, I was driving the highway that cut through the countryside like a forgotten scar. I had taken the long way home, again, trying to clear my head after a fight with my sister. I couldn't even remember what it was about anymore. Something stupid. The windshield wipers groaned under the pressure of the downpour, smearing rain more than clearing it, and the headlights barely lit 5 feet ahead. Trees along the roadside blurred into shadows. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel too tightly. That's when I saw her. A lone figure on the shoulder, standing in the rain like she'd grown out of the pavement. She wasn't waving. She didn't look up. Just stood there, drenched, arms limp at her sides. Her coat was old, too old, like something from a sepia photo in a thrift store frame. Her hair clung to her face, dark and stringy from the rain. I should have kept driving. Every instinct told me to keep going. But instead, my foot eased off the gas, and I was pulling over before I even realized what I was doing. I rolled down the passenger window halfway and leaned over. "Are you okay?" I called out, barely audible over the roar of the storm. She didn't answer. She just turned her head slowly toward me. Her eyes looked past me, not at me, like she was watching something just beyond the car. Then she opened the door and got in without asking. My heart pounded. She sat perfectly still, water dripping from her coat, pooling around her boots. She handed me a folded slip of paper without a word. I took it, glancing at the address scribbled in shaky pen. "Okay," I mumbled, starting the engine. "Let's get you home." She only spoke once. "My name is Cassie," she said, her voice soft, almost lost in the thunder. I nodded, not sure what else to say. She didn't speak again. The rest of the ride was silence, thick and unnatural. I tried the radio, but it was all static. I turned it off. I kept glancing at her from the corner of my eye. She sat stiff, unmoving, eyes locked on the road. The storm outside grew worse. Lightning flashed, and in that brief burst of white, I saw the passenger seat was empty. I gasped and looked directly. She was there, still, pale, dripping, silent. My throat tightened. I told myself it was a trick of the light, the storm, my imagination. "Where are you from, Cassie?" I asked, trying to sound normal. She didn't answer. She just traced a finger along the fogged window, watching the water streak. Her finger left no trail, no print, just hovered, like she wasn't really touching it. The storm began to ease as we neared the outskirts of town. The address she gave led us to an overgrown lane choked with weeds and branches. I slowed the car as we approached a cottage half swallowed by vines and darkness. The windows were broken. The mailbox sagged. There was no light, no sign of life. "This is it," Cassie said softly, opening the door. "Wait," I said, turning off the engine. "Let me come with you, just to make sure everything's okay." She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "I know it's empty," she murmured. We walked through the mud toward the house. The wind carried a smell, like rotting wood and wet leaves. The door was already ajar, hanging crooked on its hinges. I pushed it open with a creak. Inside, the air was damp and cold. Water dripped from the ceiling, collecting in a shallow pool on the warped floorboards. The foyer was dark, except when lightning cracked through the open doorway behind us. Then I noticed something. In the puddle, a single set of footprints. Bare feet, leading down the hallway. But no prints came in. Cassie stared at them. Her lips parted slightly. "She's here," she whispered. A shiver rippled down my spine. I turned to ask who she meant, but Cassie was already walking, slipping silently into the hallway, swallowed by the shadows. I stood frozen at the door, my breath fogging in the cold. I turned back to the car, heart hammering, and that's when I saw it. A single, wet footprint had appeared on the back seat, just one. As if someone, or something, had just stepped in. Thunder shook the sky, rain lashed the roof, and Cassie was no longer beside me. The moment I stepped out of the car, the rain soaked through my clothes like I jumped into a lake. My boots squelched in the mud as I followed Cassie toward the cottage. The storm had quieted into a steady drizzle, but the air remained thick and oppressive, as if the night were holding its breath. The house looked like it had been abandoned for decades. Vines crawled across the crumbling siding. The roof sagged in places, and one of the shutters hung loose, swinging slightly in the wind. The windows were either shattered or fogged over, like blind eyes watching us. I couldn't imagine anyone living here, yet Cassie walked toward it like she'd returned home. "This is it," she said, her voice nearly drowned by the rain. "You're sure?" I asked, already regretting getting involved. She gave me a small, almost wistful nod. "Yes. I should check inside first," I offered. "See if anyone needs help, or if it's even safe." Cassie looked at me, her soaked hair plastered to her pale face. "I know it's empty," she murmured. But she didn't argue when I reached for the door. The front door wasn't locked. In fact, it barely held onto its hinges. It groaned as I pushed it open. The smell hit me first. Mildew, rot, something sour beneath it all. The air was heavy, moist, cold. The foyer was dim and decayed. Rain leaked through the ceiling and pooled in uneven puddles on the warped wooden floor. Paint peeled in strips from the walls, and every surface was coated in a film of dust and water stains. The place hadn't seen life in years. Then I saw them. Footprints. A single set. Wet. Bare feet. Leading from the door, across the waterlogged floor, and disappearing down the hallway. No prints led in. Only out. Cassie stood beside me, frozen, her eyes wide. "She's here," she whispered. I turned to ask what she meant, but she was already walking, silent as a shadow, following the trail of prints without hesitation. I hesitated. My instincts screamed at me to turn around, to run back to the car, to leave this place and never speak of it again. But I didn't move. I couldn't. The silence inside the cottage was unnatural. Not peaceful, not still. Dead. Like sound didn't quite work here. My footsteps didn't echo. The rain outside felt miles away. Every board creaked too softly, as if muffled by something thick and unseen. I followed her. The hallway was long and narrow, the wallpaper curling like dried skin. Picture frames hung askew, their glass fogged or broken. One was still intact, though the image inside had long faded into a brownish blur. Cassie paused halfway down the hall and looked back at me. "Do you remember this place?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "What?" I frowned. Why would I? Her head tilted slightly. She didn't reply. Instead, she continued forward, turning into a room at the end of the hall. I caught up just as she stepped inside. The room was empty. No furniture, no light. Just damp floorboards and a boarded-up window. Yet Cassie walked in like she knew every corner. Suddenly, the wind howled outside, shaking the broken frame of the house. Lightning flashed, casting stark shadows across the walls, and in that instant, I saw something in the far corner. A shape, low to the ground, crawling. I blinked. It was gone. I stumbled backward into the hall, heart thudding. Cassie turned toward me, a strange smile on her face. "She doesn't like when people leave," she said calmly. My phone buzzed in my pocket, nearly making me jump out of my skin. I pulled it out. No signal, no notifications. But as I looked up again, the door was closing slowly between me and Cassie. "Wait!" I called, but it clicked shut. I reached for the handle. The wood felt ice cold, slick with moisture. I pulled. The door opened onto a different room entirely. Not the one I'd just seen, and Cassie was no longer there. I stood just outside the doorway of that decaying cottage, my body numb from cold and something deeper, something I didn't have a name for. The storm hissed behind me, the sound of rain now feeling far away, like it was falling on another world. Cassie had vanished into the hallway beyond. Not a goodbye. Not a glance back. One moment she was beside me, and the next, she was part of the shadows swallowing that place. I turned back toward the car. I couldn't explain why. Maybe I thought if I left now, just ran, I could pretend none of this had happened. Maybe I still thought this was just a terrible misunderstanding or a weird dream I'd snap out of. The moment my eyes landed on the back seat, my breath caught in my throat. There it was. A single wet footprint, right in the middle of the back seat upholstery, as if someone had stood there barefoot just seconds ago. The leather around it glistened, beads of water trailing down the seams. My heart hammered so hard it echoed in my ears. My mouth went dry. I hadn't let anyone into the back. I knew that. Cassie had only sat in the front. I staggered closer, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The footprint wasn't fading. It wasn't drying. It just stayed. Fresh. Defined. Like it had been made again and again. Then my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a notification from an unknown number. No contact name. No thread history. Just a single message. Stay with her. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to leave, but it was like my limbs belonged to someone else. I looked down at my hands and realized they were shaking uncontrollably. I reached for the seat pocket, needing something, anything, real to hold on to. My fingers brushed against a folded piece of paper tucked deep in the leather crease. I pulled it out and unfolded it. It was a newspaper clipping. Old, yellowed, the ink starting to fade. But the photo was still clear enough. A young woman, soaked hair, that same old-fashioned coat. Cassie. The headline above her photo hit me like a punch to the gut. Local girl missing, last seen hitchhiking during 1993 storm. I looked at the date again. 30 years ago. To the day. Number no. This couldn't be. I stared at the clipping, heart pounding. My breath came in sharp, shallow gasps. I looked back at the house. The front door now stood wide open, as if waiting for me. I stepped back from the car. The air around me had changed. The world felt distant, muted. The storm still poured, but I couldn't hear it the same way. Everything was too still, too staged. I tried to get back into the driver's seat, but something stopped me. Not physically, just held me there, like invisible hands had wrapped around my ankles and spine and said, "Not yet." My phone buzzed again. Another message. "She needs you." I dropped the phone on the wet gravel, backed away, nearly tripping. I looked up, and for the briefest moment, in the reflection of the rain-speckled car window, I saw something behind me. A figure. Pale, dripping, smiling. I spun around. Nothing. But the cottage door still stood open, and I swear I heard a voice, low, childlike, whisper from inside. "Don't leave her." I turned back to the car one last time, and that's when I saw it. The word "gone," smeared across the inside of the rear windshield in watery streaks, as if traced by a single trembling finger. I didn't know what waited inside that house, but something told me. If I turned away now, I'd never really leave. The silence inside the cottage felt thicker now, like the house was holding its breath. I crossed the threshold again, each step slow, deliberate. The door behind me creaked but didn't shut. It stayed half open as if daring me to leave, while warning that I never truly could. My shoes left faint wet prints beside the ones Cassie had followed earlier. I hesitated at the hallway. Cassie was gone. No sound. No voice. Just the soft dripping of water from the ceiling. The footprints had disappeared into the warped darkness beyond the bend in the hall. Something inside me resisted, but something else, something I couldn't name, pulled me forward. The hallway felt longer this time, dimmer. The house whispered in its own way, groaning beams, sighs of wind through broken panes. I passed crooked doors and fractured picture frames until I came to one door that looked wrong. It wasn't warped like the others. It wasn't half-hanging or cracked. It was shut, fully shut, and locked. The handle was rusted, but I tried it anyway. It wouldn't budge. The air here was different, colder. Not like drafty cold, unnatural cold. Like the chill you feel in your spine when someone stares at you from behind in the dark. I pressed my ear to the door, and heard whispering. Low, unclear. Like voices underwater or old radio static. My hand dropped to the knob again, and this time it twitched, just slightly, as if something shifted on the other side. A sudden gust rattled the house. The hallway light flickered. A flash of lightning lit up the room beneath the door in a brief slit of white, and for just a second, I saw shadows moving behind it. Fast, human-sized, wrong. Something slid under the door. I jumped back. It was a photograph, old, water-stained, curled at the corners. I bent to pick it up with trembling fingers. As I flipped it over, my breath hitched in my throat. It was me, standing in front of this very cottage, one arm around Cassie, smiling. I staggered back, shaking my head. That was impossible. We had never taken a picture together. I just met her tonight, or thought I had. Behind me, the hallway moaned again. I turned. The doors I'd passed earlier were now closed, all of them. And from somewhere deep in the house, something scraped along the floor, slow and steady, like furniture dragging across old wood. I backed up against the locked door, clutching the photo. And then, a whisper, clear this time, breathed into my ear though no one stood near me. "You brought her back." I spun around. No one. But the locked door creaked. Not open. It exhaled. Like something alive was behind it. Listening. Breathing with me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I snatched it, hands shaking. Another text. "Do not leave her alone." The screen flickered, then went black. I looked at the photo again, and realized something had changed. Cassie was still in the picture. But now I was fading, just like old ink washed away by water. The air pressed against me like hands. I turned to run back toward the foyer, and froze. The hallway behind me was gone. Where the door had been, there was only a wall, solid, seamless. I wasn't in a hallway anymore. I was somewhere else entirely. I don't remember how I got away from that locked room. 1 minute I was staring at the photograph in my hands, watching my own image fade like ink bleeding through damp paper. And the next, I was walking. Or maybe the house was moving. The hallway twisted behind me, reconfiguring itself with every few steps. I'd passed the same crooked painting 3 times in a row, though I never turned back. The wallpaper, once a faded yellow, seemed darker now, bruised, veined with cracks like spider webs. Every breath I took felt heavier, like the air itself was watching. Then the walls began to whisper. Not voices. Not exactly. More like memories pressed into the plaster, replaying in fragments. A creak. A girl's laugh. The sound of footsteps pacing just behind me. I turned every time. Nothing. But the echoes were getting louder. The hallway narrowed until I had to walk sideways, my shoulder brushing against peeling wood and damp wallpaper. At last, I reached a small room tucked into the corner of the house. A forgotten space, half collapsed, where mold bloomed on the ceiling and floorboards bowed beneath my feet. There was a dresser, warped and bloated with moisture. One drawer had been forced open. Inside, I found it. A journal. Old, soaked in places, the spine cracked and flaking. On the inside cover, in faded blue ink, was a name, Cassie Monroe. I flipped the pages with shaking fingers. Some were illegible, the ink melted into blue blots. Others were intact. Each entry pulled a knot tighter in my chest. Storm again tonight. Mama says I shouldn't walk, but she doesn't get it. I have to get out. I'll be okay. Someone always stops. She picked me up. A woman. Nice smile. She asked where I lived. I didn't want to lie. I just said the cottage. I don't remember anything after the car. I'm still here. I watch the road from the window. Sometimes someone else shows up. A man once. He stayed a while, then left. She didn't like that. I heard him screaming in the walls. I saw her again today, the woman who picked me up, but it wasn't her. It was someone else. But her face, the same fear, the same mistake. It's always the same. I slammed the book shut. My legs wouldn't stop trembling. I backed away from the dresser and turned toward the door. Only it wasn't there anymore. There was just wall. No seams, no knob. The room was sealing itself. The temperature dropped instantly. I could see my breath clouding in the stale air. Behind me, the floor groaned. I turned slowly. Cassie was standing in the far corner, only it wasn't the Cassie from the car. This version of her was younger, her face smeared with dirt and rain, her eyes wider than before. Hollow. She tilted her head. "I waited," she whispered. I stumbled back, clutching the journal to my chest. Waited for what? Cassie didn't move. She simply blinked once. She always comes back. And then the walls began to hum. Low, rhythmic, like a heartbeat, only not mine. The wallpaper rippled, breathing in and out. Faint impressions pressed through, faces, hands, screaming mouths that never opened. I pressed my back to the nearest wall. I could feel it pulse behind me. Then I heard it. My voice, faint but clear. "Are you okay?" The same words I'd spoken when I saw her on the road. "Are you okay?" Repeated, warped, echoing back and forth like a chant between the walls. I pressed my hands over my ears. "Are you okay?" Cassie walked forward, slowly. She reached out and placed her hand gently on the journal in my arms. "You're next," she whispered. Then the floor split beneath my feet, and the house swallowed me whole. I don't know how long I fell. Time didn't work inside that house. It didn't flow. It looped, rewound, rewrote. When I woke, I was lying on damp floorboards, heart hammering, the air so cold it burned to breathe. My clothes clung to me, soaked again as if I'd never dried. My hands trembled as I pushed myself upright. I was in another room. Unlike the others, this one wasn't decaying. It wasn't splintered or rotting or broken. It was still, preserved, clean in a way that made my skin crawl. The walls were covered in mirrors, dozens of them, some full length, others the size of hand mirrors, some cracked, others fogged. None reflected the light from the single flickering bulb overhead correctly, like they were showing a version of the room that didn't quite match the one I stood in. And none showed my reflection. I stepped forward slowly, passing a mirror with a jagged crack down the center. My hand trembled as I reached for it, but nothing greeted me. No shadow, no outline. The glass stayed blank. It was like I wasn't even there. Until one mirror, tall, rectangular, did reflect something. I moved in front of it and froze. Cassie stood behind me in the reflection. Her hair hung in wet strands over her face. Her eyes were wide, glassy, not blinking. Her coat looked heavier now, as if waterlogged and stiff. She didn't move, didn't breathe. I whipped around. The room behind me was empty. I turned back to the mirror. She was still there, closer now. My throat tightened. "What do you want?" The reflection smiled. I took a step back. Another mirror caught my eye. This one tilted awkwardly in the corner. Something shimmered inside it, like heat rising off pavement. I leaned closer. This one showed me, but not the me I knew. This version wore Cassie's coat. The fabric hung from my shoulders, soaked and frayed. My eyes looked hollow. My lips were blue. I was standing alone in a field of fog. I blinked and staggered back, heartbeat thundering. The mirrors buzzed, not with light, with sound. Whispered phrases layered over each other until they became a rushing wave of voices. "Are you okay? She's here. Stay with her. Thank you." The room vibrated. The mirrors rattled in their frames. Cracks spidered across the glass. I clutched my head, pressing my palms over my ears. "Don't leave her." The voices shrieked. Then everything stopped. The light blinked out, and the fog rolled in. Thick, white, clinging to the floor and curling around my legs like fingers. I stumbled toward the only exit, the door I came through. But when I opened it, the hallway was gone. Only fog. I ran. Through one door, into another mirror-lined hallway, then another, and another. They all led back to that same room. The mirrors always waiting, always watching. In one of them, I saw a new scene playing out. A car pulled over on the side of a dark road, headlights glowing through a torrential downpour. A woman stepped out, me. In the mirror, I watched myself call out into the storm. I couldn't hear the words anymore. I didn't have to. The girl stepped into the car. Cassie. And I understood. This wasn't a house. It was a trap. A memory loop. Feeding itself. The rain, the coat, the ride, the house. Over and over. Each time, a new Jenna fed the story forward. I turned to the final mirror, the one directly across from me. This time, my reflection stared back. Drenched. Silent. Motionless. Except the reflection lifted its hand before I did. It reached out and pressed against the inside of the glass, from behind the mirror. I screamed as the surface warped, my own hand sinking into cold, liquid silver. The glass gave way like water. I was being pulled in. I tried to run, but the room was no longer behind me. Only fog, only mirrors, only Cassie's smile waiting to close the door. I don't remember falling asleep. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I was never awake to begin with. Maybe the house had always been inside me, waiting for the right storm to bring it out. When I opened my eyes, I was in the driver's seat of my car. The engine was off. The rain had stopped, but everything was soaked. My clothes, the seat, the carpet, even the air I breathed. It felt like I'd been pulled out of a lake. My hands trembled as I touched the steering wheel. It was slick with moisture. The sky outside was still dark, but the clouds had thinned. Fog rolled across the road ahead in heavy waves, slow and unnatural, like it didn't want to leave. I looked to the passenger seat. Empty. But the seatbelt was buckled. A wet imprint remained on the fabric, Cassie's outline, and my heart sank. I wasn't alone. Not really. I reached for my phone, fingers numb. The screen was cracked, but still lit. One notification blinked. Unknown number. It's your turn now. My mouth went dry. I looked up and screamed. Cassie stood in front of the car, in the middle of the road, soaked, silent, smiling. But it wasn't the same Cassie. It was me, wearing her coat. My face, pale, lifeless, reflected in the headlights. My own eyes stared back at me, empty and distant, as water dripped from my chin. I scrambled out of the car, stumbling into the fog, but the road twisted beneath my feet. The cottage stood behind me again, unmoving, always there. The door creaked open, light flickered inside, and then the knock came. 3 slow, hollow raps. Not on my car, on the cottage door. I turned toward it, chest tight. Another woman stood there, clutching a soaked piece of paper, looking confused and shivering in the dark. She couldn't have been older than me, brown hair plastered to her forehead, eyes wide behind fogged glasses. She looked just like I had. "Hey," she called out, hesitating. I picked up someone on the road. A girl. She gave me this address." I opened my mouth. I wanted to scream, "Run! Don't go in! Leave while you can!" But my voice was gone. My lips moved. No sound came out. Behind her, the car door opened. Cassie stepped out. The same coat, the same soaked hair. But she didn't look at me. She looked at the woman and smiled. I tried to run, but the fog thickened around my legs like chains. I banged my fists on the glass of the window beside me, desperate to be heard, but no one noticed. Then Cassie turned back to me, walked up to the mirror hanging beside the door, and whispered, "It's always you." I looked at my reflection. I was fading. My face, colorless, my shape, hazy, as if the world no longer remembered me, as if I'd become her. The woman stepped inside, the door creaked shut behind her, and I watched from the mirror, silent, trapped, as the house swallowed her whole, again and again and again. I woke up alone in my car, soaking wet, no memory of the night, only a folded piece of paper in my lap, an address. I don't remember picking her up, but the passenger seat is wet, and someone's knocking at the window.